Welcome again to Speak Up, a television show brought to you by Televida. Today, our show is about faith and community. I am really excited to introduce to you today our guests. Number one, when we start talking about faith and community, we look at faith-based. What does that mean to you? What does faith-based mean? And what does the faith-based have to do with our communities? And why do we need our faith-based? So I'm just going to give you a little history. Black Christians and Muslims have been collaborative throughout history. From the Abyssinian king, now known as Ethiopia, between 615 and 616, granted Muslims fleeing persecution in Mecca a place to worship and practice their faith in peace. To the Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, founded in 1773, believed to be the first and oldest church built by slaves, was part of an underground railroad, and under many of the pews are West African Arabic scribes, meaning that they were also a part of what was going on in the building and the passing through of history. So right now, I want to introduce to you two of our faith leaders in Kansas City, Pastor Jason Browse, who is the senior pastor of Centennial United Methodist Church, and Imam Bilal Muhammad, who is the imam at El Inshura Masjid. Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So, we know historically the Black community and faith has always played a big part. You were a lead. You always led our community. We could always turn to you. And today, I'd like to just think about, do you see yourself playing that same role?
The role
of the lead in the community?
I think that has somewhat diminished because of cultural influences, but I think that faith is still a very strong and very important part in the African American community, as it should be.
Absolutely.
Although faith should enter every arena of our functioning as a community.
So earlier, before we started taping, we talked about ecosystems and villages. Mm-hmm. And I think that both of you agree that it's a language barrier when we start talking about our community. So I'm going to take out the ecosystem now, and I'm going to say, do you think that we need our faith-based leaders to take over our villages again, or to lead our villages? Pastor Browse.
Well, I would argue that faith leaders we continue to lead our villages. Now, there's an issue with perception, right? And so, for instance, the Black church, as my brother said, that our value has diminished in the eyes, but we are still the primary political, economic, and social institution in the community. So we are still the resource for all of the Black community. And so what we need actually is for folks to join with us and not work against us. So we need a coming together of all facets of the community so that we can lead not just in word, but we can lead by our faith and lead by our deeds.
Okay. And so what do you think on?
I would like to see faith lead the African American community. I would like for us to return to be a people of faith. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the faith leaders, the imams and the preachers necessarily have to be the leaders, because there are different segments of the community, banking, real estate, education, so on and so forth. But what we need is for those people who lead those institutions to be faithful people, to be good people, to be morally upright people, to be decent people, to be people who care about the community.
Can I say this? Yeah. If we study our history, the one thing that undergirds every successful movement or moment has been the faith of the people.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have something inside of you that's bigger than you, then what do you really have?
Absolutely.
And so I don't think that is simply confined to just the pastor or the imam or the spiritual leader, but I believe that God has endowed each of us with the leadership, with the faith, with the school tools and skills to really make some positive transformation in our community. So I think the faith has to be the essential, the foundational part of it.
I think you're absolutely right. I know that as a young woman, we come in and out. I grew up in church. I practiced Islam for 17 years, which is fortunate that I have had the experience of understanding the one God, and that together, it didn't matter if you, as the Abyssinian king said, that the only thing that separated the two was this thin line. And Pastor will tell you, one of the things that I always talk about is faith. When I was a young girl, I didn't understand faith. I left the church, ended up practicing Islam, came back to the church. What do we need to do in our community to open the faith up to this next generation? Because that's my biggest fear, is I look at, now I grew up in the church. I was in church all the way. My kids were christened in the same, or baptized in the same church that I was married in, that I was baptized in. And now you don't see that, even in the mosque. I know that we've had conversations. I've had conversations with my Muslim friends, and it's hard to get young people to come to the mosque for Jummah prayer, or to practice the month of Ramadan, and Ramadan Mubarak, because I know you were fasting. But what do we need to do? How do we bring? Because that's where I think our gap is going to come in. Is we're losing generations who don't know faith.
Okay. Well, I think before I lose the thought, I think one of the things that we need to do for the African American community, I think we have to separate ourselves from following the super culture, the main culture. We have gotten to the point where we follow that culture so much that we are losing our identity. And our identity is based in faith. We come from a community past, not from an individual past. We come from a people who group together and share. And I think that's one thing that we have to do. Another thing I think that we have to do is, and I lost the thought, so I'm gonna get off, and maybe it'll come back.
Come back.
Let me piggyback on that, because I think you are absolutely right. And so I think one of the things that we have to really lean into is allowing or giving folks permission to bring their entire selves to the faith community. So in other words, we don't have a sacred self and a secular self, right? That's not part of our culture. That's something that has been developed on this side of the water. And so that means, you don't have to pretend that like you're one way throughout the week and then have a completely different personality on Sunday or Friday or Saturday, right? But we bring our total being, our total selves, because God knows who we are, right?
Yes.
And so God knows who we are better than we do. And so I think when we open and we invite the totality of our especially our young people into our faith communities, then we can be more authentic as a faith community as well, because we're not playing a role on certain days of the week, right? And trying to pretend that we are or are not who we are.
Yeah. I want to shift gears real quickly though, because so when we start talking, and I didn't want to use ecosystem, I'm going to say when we start talking village, a village means that we're together. We're working in commune. That means that there's no silos. So how do we fix the silos? I think a lot of our getting away from who we were and who we are is the representation of silos. We have so many. Nobody works together anymore. It bothers me when you have churches and mosques on the same block and corner, and they don't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a part of the cultural trap that we have fallen into. We've gone too much after trying to make other things work, but not working on our own selves. I like to tell people that I was the last one. My generation was the last generation raised in the village. I knew what every man on my block did, every man in the household did for a living. Everybody lived in our community. We knew everyone. Everyone knew us. They knew who our parents were. They knew whose children we were.
Yeah.
We got away from that. And I think that another thing that we have to do is we have to identify with the best aspirations of our past leaders.
Yes.
And when we do that, we can get back on track. Right now, we're not on track. We're everywhere. We're trying to do everything, everybody else's way. But if we refer back to the best leaders that we've had and their aspirations and what they were focused on, we can kind of get our cultural and our moral compass back. And that's something that we lost, in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing I would say is it's important for us to highlight our commonalities as opposed to allowing our differences to keep us separate. So as I look at my brother to my left, I see someone who looks like me, and as I'm hearing him talk, he cares about the things that I care about. Now, I go to church on Sunday morning. He worships at a different time of the week, and that's something that's unique to our experiences. But we both are interested in the uplift of our community. We are both interested in recreating community and village, right? Mm-hmm. And so what would it look like for us to come together on what we agree on as opposed to being separated by what we disagree on?
Absolutely. That's another big issue with me, is that I believe that we have got caught up in the narrative that does not belong to us, but we've taken it on as the negative. Mm-hmm. So we live in the negative aspects of our history. So it's always about how bad we were treated or how much we've gone through, which is by no means to be put under the rug. Mm-hmm. But when do we get over that and start looking at the successes, looking at the fact that we still stand and that we are strong and intelligent, and we have we built this country. So when do we start looking at those positive, not only leaders, but historical things?
So what you're talking about, it brings me to this concept in theology about redemptive suffering, right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, when a person or a group of people suffer, that can color their experiences to where they're unable to move forward. Mm-hmm. But when it becomes redemptive, we use that as strength, and we recognize that what we've been through did not destroy us, it did not kill us, but absolutely we can use that as strength, knowing that we can make it through even the next obstacle. And so I think that it's always important for us to remember. Actually, I think it's important for the remembering, because it helps us to move forward. It helps us to be able to weather the next storm. And so when we use language like "get over it," I kind of shrink back a little bit from that. I do think we need to be able to move forward, but I think we also need to use our collective memory to help us to continue to move forward.
I agree.
I agree.
I think maybe the next thing for us to do, and I think this is starting to happen among a lot of our young people, is to really plan and collaborate on things that make a difference for our community.
Yes.
Whether it be banking or education. I mean, if we don't know by now that the educational system is not designed for our best benefit,
absolutely,
then, so from knowing that it's not, then it's time for us to come together and produce our own schools, have our own schools. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at this whole issue about what's it called, You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the racing school. What's it?
Critical race
critical race theory.
Right.
Okay, so
Yes.
if you look at the pushback, that's all these alarms going off over nothing, you know, but wanting to share the truth with students.
Yeah.
Then what does that tell you about the willingness of the superculture to really teach in a way that would most benefit all of the students? So, I mean, our young people, I think, they've seen that it's better to move and plan and pool their resources together on a lot of levels. And I think that's going to happen. I think that's just part of God's plan, you know, regardless of how we might act as older people. I think that's part of God's plan. And that's something that we have to do.
My brother just said something powerful, and it reminds me of this quote from Audre Lorde, who says, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools."
Absolutely.
And it's not that we want to spend time dismantling the master's house. We want to build our own house.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
So the implication in that quote is that we have to know what our task is and design our own method to accomplish that task.
So let me ask you this. Does that mean that we need to segregate ourselves? Is that, and this is a question that's going to get thrown out there because
that we have to have our plan. Every cultural group, every ethnic group that comes here has their plan. The Chinese have a plan. They have an independent plan while they live in America and see themselves as American Chinese. But they have an independent plan, independent economic plan, independent educational plan. They have an independent plan, and they use the resources in America to help them fulfill their plan. The Italians have done it. The Jewish people do it. Everybody does it. But when we talk about doing it, we're un-American. You know, so we put too much into, in my opinion, we put too much into trying to be the American that they want us to be. And we neglect the foundation of our own growth. So I think that's what I see happening with young people. I mean, I have a daughter who went to college, and she came back and she was militant. She was really militant. And I asked her older sister, what happened? And her older sister said, Dad, when she saw Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, when they saw all these things happening, but they didn't see justice coming as a result of those things, it triggered something in them. They understood that this is not an environment that will look after our lives and value our lives like other lives are valued. And from that point on, I think many young people just said, look, we've had it. We're going to build our own. We're going to make this happen. Now all we need to do is come together and make sure that we're walking in the same direction so that we can get to the same place that we all want to go, which is a dignified place for our culture, our people, our soul, our babies, our women, for our whole life.
And we can do that in America. I mean, there's, as you said, there's no other culture that's not doing it. It's going to be, it's really up to us. I mean, at the end of the day, we can still say them, but until we, again, come out of our own way and trust one another and rebuild our villages, we're losing because we're not doing the work that we need to do. I agree with you with the schools. I have a real issue with schools because I look at the history of how they have changed curriculum in schools depending on how many Black students became students. So my cousin graduated from Central High School in the 60s when it was all white, early 60s. My sister graduated from Southeast High School in 68. It was all white. I graduated from Ruskin High School in 1976. It was all white. I don't even have to say anything else because these schools are predominantly Black. So, of course, if we're not going to demand education for our kids, who is? One of the things that I've learned in this position as the chamber leader is our investment. What do we invest? why have we taken on this mentality of welfare that every time we walk in the door, we need you to give us something? And then when monies or things come to the city, we get the last end of it. Well, we haven't invested anything because those who sit at the table are investing. I know this because I've been able to sit at the table and saw it with my own eyes. So how do we, because there's enough collectively that we can invest. It's not like we can't invest.
Right.
How do we get to the point where we become a part of the fabric so that we do have a voice, so that we can make a difference?
You said a key word, trust.
Yeah.
Trust. You know, Dr. Amos Wilson, the famous African-American psychiatrist, he said, I think he said one time, he said, the American educational system, it educates us to support the economic desires of America. It's not really for us becoming enlightened so much.
Yeah.
It's to support an economic system that already exists, that is a beast by its own right, and it cares about what it cares about.
Can we name it capitalism?
Can
we name it?
Right.
Right.
I mean, absolutely.
And capitalism, kind of white supremacy. These are all things that are foundational to what America is, and our mode is resistance to that. So when you talk about separating or segregating, part of that is nonviolent resistance on our part. I mean, I know that's probably radical for people to think about, but when we look at the movement of the '60s, that's part of the tactic of resistance that was really working for a time. And then when, whether you want to call it integration or desegregation, happened, what it really did was integrated the dollar and destroyed our communities.
Right.
And so now we have to figure out what it looks like to rethink community when we don't live next to each other, when we don't know our neighbor's name and what our neighbor does for a living. How do we reshape community? And I think, bringing this back full circle, I think the faith communities are one place, a place where we can start to begin to reshape and rethink community.
Yeah, and it's a sad fact that we are losing an identifiable African-American community.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the Latinos, they have an identifiable community.
Yes.
But we have lost our identifiable African-American. We're losing it.
Yes.
I was in Brooklyn, and there's a large Hasidic Jew community in Brooklyn, and one of my friends who pastors a church in Brooklyn, he told me that the dollar circulates 17 times in that community before it leaves.
Yeah.
He said in the Black community in Brooklyn, where he lives, the Black dollar circulates twice.
Well, at least it's making it to the community, because in our community, we did a survey and the dollar doesn't even make it to the Black community in the Midwest. So, because most of them cash their check at
check cashing places,
places and Walmart. And so your money is out of the community before you even bring it in. And that's another thing that brings me to money and buying Black and buying your own. I did a study on Black Wall Street. And I went to Oklahoma, and that's where I really got a broader idea of how we don't talk about our successes. So Black Wall Street, it's a success story. It's not a tragedy. A tragedy happened in the story, but the success was first generation freed slaves created a town that was wealthier than most towns in America and survived through the Great Depression. And my thought was, how did they do that? And was it only on the Black dollar? Well, it wasn't, because white people bought from them too. So they were blacksmiths and seamstresses and barbers and cooks and everything that they were doing in their town. They were still getting that money. The money was circulating both ways.
Yeah.
And now when I look at us going into business, I see a lot of, especially our small Black businesses, looking for just the Black dollar. But we are in a capitalistic system. And even in the resistance, we have too many facets in the system that lives under the system. I'm just wondering, can we have a resistance that will make a difference for us? Or do we become a part and figure out how we work in this system to build our culture and build our communities and get our education? I mean, how do we do that?
Well, I think my brother Imam Bilal, kind of pointed us in this direction earlier in the conversation where we talked about the trust that we have to have for one another, and we also have to prioritize community over our own individual wants or desires. Okay, so in other words, what have you sacrificed for the good of the village or the community, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's okay that you can, live in the suburbs, right? But is that building community for anyone? Is that how is that leaving a legacy for anyone behind you?
Yeah.
And that has to become a priority, and that's gonna involve some trust and some sacrifice on our parts.
So, quick question about leadership, especially in the faith base. What are you guys doing or thinking now to even do to start combating this, or are you wanting to combat?
Combat the whole.
Just a start, because we've got to start somewhere.
Well, I think I had to go back to one of the things I first said. It's important that we have people of faith, of good intentions, honest people who have a moral compass. One thing that we do that we have allowed ourselves to do is lose our moral compass. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at what comes across the radio. Mm-hmm. I mean, but we buy into freedom of speech so heavy that we don't see the destruction of what comes across the radio to our children's minds. I had a mother-in-law, she used to say, "Don't fornicate my mind. Don't fornicate my ear, with your music." But because we buy into this freedom of speech thing so heavy, we let that come to our children's ears. So we have some foundational work that we have to get done first, because you can't have a thriving economic community without people who have the same kind of values. The people in Oklahoma and the Black Wall Street, quote unquote, they had the same sense of values, the same sense of respect, same business integrity. They had to. If we can't build anything economically unless we have the trust, some kind of a moral compass that everybody tries to abide by, value systems that everybody tries to abide by, no matter how much money we have as a community. If we don't have those things first, it's going to be chaotic and it's going to crumble.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think and just moving forward from this kind of foundational thing of having a moral compass or being rooted and grounded in faith, I think we really have to prioritize economic empowerment and development. And so one of the major things is, I mean, what would it look like for every Black house of worship, faith community, whatever you want to call it, came together and we started our own bank?
Yeah.
Right? Because then you have real power. You have lending power. We have to trust each other.
That's something that must happen yesterday.
Yes.
Far overdue. That's exactly what I mean. We're way past due.
Yeah.
Here's another piece of that. Our people used to be the best builders. You mentioned
absolutely.
Used to be the best builders. But when the unions were started, they denied our people membership in the unions. Mm-hmm. So slowly but surely, we lost these skills that help to make the economic engine of the communities work. So one of the things we got to do, hopefully our faith-based communities can do, is focus on work skills, giving work skills back to our people that they don't have. We used to have all these young people hanging out on the streets, but they don't want to do that. They would rather know how to build a house from top to bottom. They would rather know how to do things than hang out on the street. But the avenue for them learning to do those things came with so many blocks in it. But we have to get back to that.
Yeah. Well, and then we also, I say this, we talk about white privilege, but we got to look at Black privilege too. People that have taken the privileges and forgotten about the community. I being in a leadership position as a chamber of commerce, I've had the unfortunate pleasure of meeting plenty of leaders who don't have the best intentions when it comes to the community. Yeah. So instead of going in and really building the businesses and building the person to have the capacity and be ready, I will take a stipend from big business and send somebody that's not qualified, which gives them an opportunity to say, well, they're not qualified. And we know that for us, we represent everything. If I mess up, that's years for you guys because of me. So I think one of the things that you said that was really, really important was the building up, the teaching, the training, the getting them ready to do the work. But also, I think that in our organizations, we sit too long, that we have a faith-based arm, that we collaborate with faith-based, bringing them in to help with the business sector and housing and healthcare and education.
I think the vision, the larger vision, would come from the faith-based communities. I think even if we look at our past, our leaders who were more conscious of God, they thought broader. They thought about the whole community. Yeah. They saw themselves as shepherds. Yeah. And they wanted to look out for the whole flock. Yeah. So I think in that regard, the faith-based leaders still have that in them.
So I would say, like, using the chamber as a place to convene. See, the chamber's job is not to do the work; it's to convene the resources. Yeah. And if we could bring all the resources into one place where we can start working to tick off these things, know, and we've got to get out of our own way and stop having to always be first. Right. If I'm not first, then we're not going to do it, because we've got to look at what's going to be the best starting place that's going to domino affect everything. I don't know how much more time we have, but I want to tell you guys, this has been really, really a good conversation. I didn't know where it was going to go for sure, but I knew that I wanted to talk about growing up. I know my church, Centennial United Methodist Church, was our foundation. I was in everything from youth group. I was part of BMCR. The choir. I can't sing, but I was in the choir, believe it or not. And now, I've been a worship leader. I've been a part of this faith community, and it's been faith that has gotten me through my whole entire life, including my 17 years of Islam. It was Islam that really taught me about the one God. I didn't understand it, but going through and reading Quran and learning. So really, I think the importance of this whole episode is about how do we bring faith and community back to the center of who we are and grow from there.
One thing that faith does, it always inspires our hope, right? Yeah. And so, if you have a faithful people, then you have a hopeful people. Yeah. And so I think that's always going to be important for what is ahead of us to maintain and strengthen our hope.
Great. Any last words?
You know what? I think that God has made it so we're faithful people. That's just us. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't know if that does exist to the degree it exists in. I know there are other cultures of people who are very, very faithful. Yes. But I know that's us. We are a faithful people. We don't always live up to, what we should, but we still are. We have a heart. We have a child's heart for the global world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to say thank you guys for joining us today for Speak Up. I want to thank Televida for producing the show and making sure that we had all things right today. Again, I want to say stay tuned. We have many more shows to go. We have a show coming up pretty soon called Tell It Two Cities. That is going to be the two mayors of Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas. Stay tuned. Thanks.